We often hear of major headlines about medical device or life science companies being acquired or hitting the public markets for millions or even billions of dollars. These stories are exciting and often reflect the dream of many founders to develop a technology that makes a meaningful impact in healthcare, securing funding, and eventually achieving a successful exit. But the real challenge is getting started. Starting your company can feel far more difficult than having the vision. In this video, we'll walk through the funding landscape for your medical device or life science startup, breaking down key sources of capital, their challenges, and how they align with different stages of your company's growth. Medical device and life science startups need more capital than traditional tech companies, mainly due to the regulatory hurdles involved. Development is expensive because clinical trials, FDA approval, and manufacturing scale-up requires significant resources. The key to securing funding lies in understanding which source of capital fits your company's development stage and how to use it effectively. So now let's take a look at the stages of development. As it relates to the stages of capital, where you're at today, you're probably at the startup phase. You're developing a new medical device or life science technology, and you're just getting it off the ground. As you progress through the stages of development, perhaps you made some prototypes and you're now in the early stage. As you advance and you have a better understanding of your regulatory pathway, you'll then advance to the expansion stage. And lastly, at the late stage, this is where you go to market. Now, specifically for medical device and life science companies, the early stage is for those preclinical activities, such as prototype development and benchtop testing. At the expansion stage, depending on your technology and your regulatory pathway, you may have to demonstrate some clinical results. The first source of capital is often referred to as friends and family. There's a third F in there, but we'll leave it out for this video. These are personal contacts who you believe in your vision and are willing to provide small amounts of seed money, often ranging from $10,000 to $50,000. This route depends heavily on your comfort level. And the question is, are you willing to ask people close to you for financial support? If personal networks aren't an option, the next best option is to look at federal programs and grants. At the federal level, SBIR, also known as the Small Business Innovation Research Grants, are a popular option because they are non-dilutive, meaning you get grant money to stimulate your research, to build on some prototypes, but you're not giving any equity. But these grants are very competitive because you're competing against the entire country, and oftentimes it will take months to get a response, and your technology is going to be evaluated from leading researchers in their fields. So prepare for multiple rejections. After all, this is part of the process when it comes to fundraising. At the state level, there's also programs available to you. In South Dakota, for instance, the Governor's Office of Economic Development and the South Dakota Biotech offers support programs and funding resources for companies with long commercialization timelines. Now, when it comes to dilutive sources of capital, angel investors is a great funding option. They typically write smaller checks, anywhere from $50,000 to $200,000, but finding the right angels is key. For example, in a state like South Dakota, the network like the Enterprise Institute connects startups with angels, but not all investors will understand your specific industry. Investors prefer to back sectors that they know, so look for those with a background in the life sciences or healthcare. As you grow, venture capital becomes more a viable option. VCs traditionally invest larger sums in exchange for equity and typically have a thesis. They have a focus on industries that they have an expertise in. So in the life science and healthcare sectors, many VCs bring operational experience, regulatory knowledge, and industry connections to the table. Targeting a VC with healthcare expertise can significantly improve your chances of securing funding. For some companies, financing from a bank is another option. Unlike equity investments, these loans do not dilute your ownership, but they come with repayment obligations and interest rates. This type of funding is more suitable when you have a predictable cash flow. And when you're at the later stage, the initial public offering, also known as the IPO, is your next best bet. While IPOs are typically reserved for later stages, some companies pursue them earlier if they have a strong product pipeline. Going public provides liquidity, but also adds regulatory burdens and public scrutiny. So now let's take one step back and look at your stages of development as a whole and how it affects your business. Going back to early stages of startup, early expansion, and late, we start with the technology, business, and risk. As you move forward and as you advance through these stages of development, your technology and business risk will be less. You're gaining more experience, you're having more resources, and through this, as you put more people in the team, as you're fundraising, your founder's equity is also going to decrease because there will be a point where your equity will dilute. And this all ties into the investment, right? As you raise more money, some of those early stage capital can be non-dilutive, meaning that there are grants. But when you are bringing on investors and you're bringing more people in the team, your investment is also going to increase. However, this trade-off is necessary because each new investment brings expertise, resources, and ultimately increases the company's value. Understanding this trade-off helps you plan long-term, and the goal is not to retain ownership of your entire company, but to ensure that each funding round that you do adds value to the business. Funding a medical device or life science startup requires strategic planning. At each stage of development, different sources of capital become relevant, from personal networks to VCs, from grants to IPOs. Aligning your funding path with your growth milestone and always being prepared to adjust as needed.